Bible Made Simple. My name is William Barrett, and I have a small ministry called the Bible Made Simple. And we're going to look at how the Bible can be made simple today. Parable of the Old and New Wine Bottles. We find this parable in Luke chapter 5, verse 37 through 39. And no man putteth new wine into old bottles, else the new wine will burst the bottles and be spilled, and the bottles shall perish. But new wine must be put into new bottles, and both are preserved. No man having drunk old wine straightway or immediately desires new, for he saith the old is better. Now on the surface of this parable, we don't see anything spiritual. It's just talking about grape juice. Old fermented grape juice and new fresh grape juice. And two types of bottles, old and new bottles. So how do we get to the spiritual meaning of this thing? Well, the parable points out that the type of container that wine is placed in is very important, and that the container must be new in order to preserve both the wine and the container. And we also know that Jesus wouldn't waste his time telling his disciples how to preserve their grape juice. There'd be many other people in the village that could have done that. So this parable definitely has a hidden meaning that we need to go below the surface to find out. Our first project here is to identify the real objects. And in this case, we're going to look at the bottles, old bottles and new bottles. And now we have to discover their spiritual meaning. Well, if we looked at Psalms 119, verse 53, David says, I am become like a bottle. So the Bible is telling us a bottle spiritually represents a person. Jeremiah agrees with this. In chapter 19, verse 1, the Bible says, Thus saith the Lord, go and get a potter's earthen bottle. And he continues in chapter 18, verse 3, 4, and 6, Then I went down to the potter's house, and the vessel he made of clay was marred. So he made it again another vessel. Saith the Lord, Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hands, so are you in my hand. So a bottle clearly represents a person. And here we've discovered that the marred or old bottle that needs to be made new again represents an unconverted person. And the bottle that's been made new is the converted person. Going on, there are two other objects in here, the old wine and the new wine. And again, we have to let the Bible tell us what these objects, these real objects, represent spiritually. And we would find the answers in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1. Begins by saying, Wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging. Whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. Isaiah 28:7. But they have erred through wine, and through strong drink are out of the way. And Habakkuk 2:5 says, Yea also because he transgresseth by wine. When we compare these scriptures and put them together, we see that wine is something that will deceive us. It will cause us to err, to be out of the right way. It will cause us to be transgressors. So wine, old wine, represents false doctrine. New wine then would represent true doctrine. We also need to look at these actions of eating or drinking to discover their spiritual meaning. And in Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 2, the Bible says, I would lead thee and bring thee into my mother's house, who would instruct thee. I would cause thee to drink. So instruction is associated with drinking. Jeremiah 15, verse 16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and rejoicing of my heart. So to drink or to eat represents being instructed or taught. Just to briefly summarize what we've learned, a bottle represents a person, and the type of bottle, the type of person. An old bottle, an unconverted person, and a new bottle, a converted person. Wine represents doctrine, and the type of wine, the type of doctrine. Old wine, false doctrine. New wine, true doctrine. And to drink means to be instructed or taught. Now let's just talk about these symbols for a minute. Old wine, representing false doctrine. Remember, I've said that there's always a relationship between the physical and the spiritual. All right, physically, old wine that causes you to become drunk, you cannot walk a straight line. You will be out of the way. And the old wine representing spiritual things, representing spiritual false doctrine, you will also be out of the way and not walk the straight path that God has designed for you. If you've learned false doctrine, it causes you to be out of the way or to deviate from the truth. So there's always this physical spiritual relationship that we need to keep in mind. Now we're ready to take what we've learned, the spiritual meaning of these objects, and put them together so that we will learn what the spiritual truth here is that God is trying to teach us in this parable. So what we would do, again, we would write the verse, the Bible verse, just the way it is, double space the lines, either underline or highlight each real object, and right above the real object we would parentheses. And then we would simply insert in the parentheses the spiritual meaning of each of these objects. Here you see I've done that. Over new wine, I've put true doctrine. Over old bottles, I've put unconverted people, and so forth. Now, all we have to do is read that verse, let our eyes jump up to the spiritual meaning above each real object, and read that, and it makes our paraphrase very easy. Let's go back there and look at that again. No man puts, and now we're going to let our eyes jump up, true doctrine into unconverted people. Else the true doctrine will burst the people or be rejected by the people and be spilled, and the people will perish. But true doctrine must be put into converted people, and both are preserved. No man having been taught false doctrine straightway or immediately desires true doctrine, for he says the false doctrine is better. So now our paraphrase would be simply written out like this. No man can teach true doctrine to unconverted people, because the true doctrine will be rejected by the people, and the people will be lost. But true doctrine must be taught to converted people, and both the doctrine and the people will be saved. No man having been taught false doctrine immediately desires true doctrine, because he thinks the false doctrine is better. Now we look at our conclusions. This parable is not teaching how to preserve grape juice, but rather how to give Bible studies. An unconverted person is not ready to accept doctrinal truth because it's not in his best interest of serving himself. Only when a person has given their heart to Jesus are they willing to accept true doctrine, which causes them to serve Jesus instead of themselves. Thus, the parable is teaching that a person must be taught about Jesus first and become converted, and then they can be taught true doctrine.